one of the other dark sides of the ring was Chris Candido and Tammy Sytch. This was the first episode in the run. Now, there was, for the most part, everything I knew. I've interviewed Johnny Candido a couple of times, talked to him occasionally, and just from what you know with the lore of Chris and Tammy. But there's one thing I didn't know, and I don't know if you can speak to this, is that I think Tammy and Chris, or at least Tammy, was suspended at one point by Paul. Then when they came back, they filmed a sort of like backstage interview with Tammy, where she's talking about all the drug issues. And I remember seeing it on the documentary because I had no idea it existed. And when I saw it there, I was like, man, that's got Melanie Pillman being interviewed by Vince McMahon live on Raw a day after Brian died, sort of vibe, like really exploitative. And it just it gave me one of those sort of distasteful sort of shudders on that.
Yeah.
Do you remember that airing at the time?
I don't remember it airing, again, because I rarely watched much television after I was in the industry, but I do remember hearing about it. Tammy, there's a dichotomy there because she was also accepted in medical school. And when she told me that, I thought, okay, it sounds like just a line, right? Because not many people in wrestling have been accepted in medical school. So I would quiz her and she knew her stuff, so, and a very intelligent young woman, obviously a beautiful young lady, and very adept at our business. And coming in at a time when, the spotlight wasn't necessarily on the divas. It was still the guys' sport. And, there was if I'm in a room with Terry Funk and Dory Funk and stuff, I'm shut up. I'm listening to these guys. And so there was a definite pecking order. And I do remember the irony of it was that there was a lot of drug usage in ECW. And I remember Paul, it was after one of my surgeries, and I was prescribed Percocets. And I took one before I went to the rings. I had surgery like a week or two before that. And he grabbed me, pulled me out to the parking lot, and like sort of yelling at me, "You're the leader of the dressing room and you're not supposed." So-and-so's in there snorting coke. So-and-so's in there shooting up. So-and-so's in there smoking pot, doing this, doing this, doing. I took the pill bottle. I said, "I'm prescribed these, Paul. My doctor prescribed these." And, but I understood his point. I think it was his way. Paul had a strange management style. He wanted to be the boss and accept the glory, and he deserved a good chunk of it. A really, really great booker. But when there was an issue between guys, being that he was the boss of the company, he would let it fester and fester and fester and fester because he didn't want to step in there and be the bad guy and try to wrangle it out. And then he would only get involved when he absolutely had to. And then, there was an incident with me and Sam in Pittsburgh, and he made us all stay afterwards and lectured us. And then over the next few weeks, this kept building again and again and again. And there was no there was nobody, Paul not letting any of the pressure off. And, so he was a great booker, but a shitty boss, because he's the guy that I can't walk in the dressing room and say, "Hey, so-and-so, stop doing this," or whatever. Cause they're going to have, screw you, franchise. He wouldn't do it. And so there was that kind of dichotomy. Tammy was by this time becoming a bit of a loose cannon herself. I'll get back to that one second. The sidebar to this, with what's happened recently, I take none of the responsibility away from Tammy, but this is really the net result when you keep getting slapped on the wrist, when you're doing things that are pretty illegal, drinking and driving and doing things. Ultimately, though, it was her responsibility. She's the one that made the decision to get in that car and do that. And there's part of me that I'm ferociously mad at her, for being that stupid. And at the same time, my heart breaks for her because she'd always been allowed to get away with stuff like this, in the business and then out of the business and, getting these slaps on the wrist for these DUIs. I would think if you get one DUI, you'd be, if you don't learn your lesson there, you're probably going to, get a tough lesson. Like I think she's going to, but I think ultimately what's going to hurt her is how she's responding on the internet to people. She shows no remorse. and she's telling people F you and whatever, and she can try to deflect and blame the guy. I guess somebody, again, I don't do the computer much. So
but
people
she's
are
not
telling
been
me she's on this
sentenced
thing.
yet either. That's the thing. She's putting all this out there, and she's not been sentenced yet. She
Right.
keeps on deferring.
Yes.
Yeah, keeps on deferring the trial, which I think is.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works in America, but I believe you can defer trials for many years. And I think the theory is that basically you're going to serve time, so the more time you can put between the incident and then the actual trial, hopefully people forgive or forget or whatever. Is that roughly where I'm getting
sort
at
of, yeah. There's there's a lot of, you can't do it forever. You can't put it off forever unless you have a whole lot of money. But I think that she's I would prolong it as long as I could too, because I think the hammer's going to drop this time, because the number of incidents and the fact that a person's dead over this. And even if the guy was doing drugs, I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I've heard people have said to me that that's some of the things he said. So if I'm wrong on that, I apologize. But I don't care if the guy had just snorted a pound of cocaine. If he's sitting at a red light and his car stopped and you run your car up the backside, that probably had something to contribute. So I'll get back to the stuff with Tammy. By this time, this was becoming a big issue in ECW. There was a midpoint, and I can't specifically remember the year, probably 96, 7 into 8 somewhere, where the cliques started popping up. Sandman had his crew, me and Bam Bam, Taz and Perry, Chris, we'd all dress in our room. And there was these divides going on between. And Paul, in fairly short order, actually did come to us and say, you guys need to break this up, and so I would go and dress with these guys, and Chris would go over and dress with those guys, and to try to get it back to that family that it had always been, that fraternity it had always been. And it worked to some degree. But there was a fight outside the arena one night because Tammy had said some things to one of the guys in the bar next door, and it turned into a riot in the front parking lot. There was a lot of that. And and the fans have heard all the stories inside the business. Chris was a very non-assertive person, and when me and Bam or whoever his friends, we'd say to him like, "Man, you gotta stop this. You gotta stand up to this." And he just wouldn't. He was so in love with Tammy, but they also co-enabled each other. And that's if anybody out there knows anything about drugs and addiction, that when you have two people co-enabling each other and existing with each other in their own little segment of the world, that becomes a very dangerous thing. And Chris had an extremely addictive personality. If he was working out, he's working out to the umpteenth degree. If he was taking pills, to the umpteenth degree. His matches, to the umpteenth degree. So, for 10 years, I thought for sure he's going to die from pills. Gets cleaned up, and then the cruelty there is he dies from a broken ankle, a severely broken ankle.